Welcome to the Soul Mirror. I'm your host, Shreya. Today's conversation invites deep honesty about illness, identity, and the body as a messenger. Dayna Wylder, diagnosis of multiple sclerosis wasn't just a medical moment, it was a mirror reflecting years of disconnection, unspoken trauma, and survival mode living. This episode is not just about pathology, it's about listening, remembering, and redefining what healing truly means. So, welcome, Dana. I'm honored to have you on my show.
Thank you so much for having me.
And when you look back, how did MS begin mirroring a deeper soul level disconnect long before the diagnosis?
Yeah, so I think it was a beautiful mirror because it was very meaningful in the symptoms matching actually what had been going on emotionally and what I was on purpose trying to accomplish. So I had had a lot of trauma throughout my life, starting in childhood. I actually had a vagal nerve dysfunction when I was a child and was passing out and holding my breath frequently. And I had a lot of ear infections, and I always seemed to have some kind of like a weakness in my system that allowed infections to happen and other things. And all the trauma building up over the years. And I really tried to not be in my body. So I tried very hard to disconnect, and I did that through escapism. So, I grew up during the rave culture, and there was a lot of late night parties and drugs and alcohol, and kind of numbing yourself to having to live in the reality of being yourself and in your body. And I know other people that have suffered a lot of trauma in their lives. Your body becomes sometimes an uncomfortable place to live in, and we try to disconnect sometimes. And you see that even in more subtle ways in our society with the opioid crisis now, overeating, right? With the obesity rising and diabetes and all kinds of autoimmune conditions where people really have stopped really being engaged with their body. But MS ultimately manifested for me at the height of the trauma for me in my life. And so my firstborn son had just passed away. And he passed away during a time where my marriage was already in turmoil because I had an abusive partner who had a diagnosis of bipolar. So he was suffering in his own way, but very much to the detriment of my health as well, because I had to live in the chaos all the time. And MS, anyone that's not familiar, is a neurological disease where the body sensations are not being felt. And because they're not being felt, like no, there's no temperature, there's no coordination, there's muscle weakness. The nervous system doesn't give the correct information to the brain in order to make meaningful movements. Some people also lose mental capacity, ability to speak, and other types of symptoms besides just in the physical body. So what manifested for me ultimately was disconnection between my mind and my body, but in a permanent way that I was no longer in control of. Because now, regardless of if I wanted to come back into my body and to be in control and to live within my body, my disease was preventing me from doing that. And so it kind of became full circle where instead of trying to escape my body, was on a mission now to how to be back in it and how to embody it in a meaningful way.
Yes, thank you for sharing your story with our audience. And were there signals that your body was sending that only made sense in hindsight?
Yeah. So one of the first symptoms I had was loss of vision, and I went almost blind in one eye. It slowly recovered, and this is before I had been diagnosed with MS. This is in the beginning because MS is a kind of an enigma. There's many symptoms to it, and living in Canada with free medical system means we wait a long time for medical care. So it was a long process to get there to diagnosis. But in the time that my eyesight was recovering, it went blind again, but this time complete blackness. Came back in shades of gray and then eventually kind of what I think of as like Easter egg colors. So there was some color, but it wasn't saturated anymore and the acuity was gone. And, some people had suggested to me in my family at that time that that was my body not wanting to see my reality. So there was something energetic about my body shutting down and saying, I don't want to face what's going on in my life. And at the time, that really bothered me because it seemed to like dismiss the fact that this was a real physical thing that was happening. And I don't want any of your listeners to also feel like when I say that we're responsible for our own energy patterns, our own thoughts, which leads to illness, doesn't mean that I'm blaming people for their illness because, especially a lot of the trauma that happens to us is when we're young and we're not in control. What becomes our responsibility, though, as we get older, is to, wind back and do the healing that's required to come back to a place of wholeness. But definitely, the loss of vision really was something about me not wanting to see what was going on in my life, and I think even just the not feeling of my body. Because if you've ever lived with a chronic abuse that's happening all the time, you can't really stay present to it because it's more than your nervous system can handle. So really a shutdown really does happen where you kind of trap yourself in a different place in your mind while you're in the room with the person. And that way you don't have to really engage with it. And that ultimately is what happened. And so I think that my symptoms really very much so mirrored what was going on inside.
Yes, it's really striking how clarity often arrives after the body speaks loudly enough to be heard. And also describe the diagnosis as an awakening rather than an ending. What shifted internally at that moment?
Yeah, well, I think that because I had never listened before, right? I had spent so much of my life keeping myself busy. So even after I got rid later in my life, before getting married and having babies, I had stopped using substances as an escape mechanism. But I instead then moved myself into doing, constantly in motion. Like I started running, but it had to always be like a marathon and then a triathlon. Like there was always a goal, there was always somewhere I was going, and I always had to be busy because I think I felt that striving towards goal and perfectionism made me okay. I was valuable then. I was doing something instead of just being in the body. And I think that, pushing through that, when I look back, that if I had have listened in the beginning to the subtle symptoms that my MS was trying to tell me, I might not have ever gotten that sick, but I also might never have gotten to a place where I was forced to really make a change. Because I think for a lot of us, and I see a lot of with my clients and people that come to my sound classes, that they don't really have their back against the wall enough. So the stick that's hitting them isn't really hard enough yet to really push them into change. So they just kind of accept a life that's sort of unexamined, without a lot of meaning and purpose, people living on autopilot, just going through the motions of every day. My MS hit me so hard, and it full force made me reevaluate every single thing in my life, that I was forced to really look at the bigger picture of healing, and what was I doing? What did I want out of my life? And what needs did I really have? I had spent so much of my life walking on eggshells of other people's addictions and abuse that I never really took the time to really think about what my emotions were, what were my needs, what were my vision, what was my inner or my higher self trying to communicate to me, and what did it want out of life? And the MS really gave me an opportunity to really have that, and in two ways. So one being that because I was forced now to stop doing everything else and I had to realign to it. But it also gave me the actual physical time because once I was unable to work and I was unable to do other things, all I really had was my mind. And I just had myself because everybody else, as much as they loved me and they cared for me, their lives went on. So, everybody still had school and work and sports and, hobbies. And for the most part, I was just left alone in my own thoughts. And you really then have the opportunity to really examine and self-reflect when you're kinda stuck now in your mind. And finding those things out about those innermost parts of myself and really getting to know myself was the bridge back into the body. Because as I calmed my mind and I made an environment that was more conducive for healing, and I practiced things that aided in my healing, my body responded to that and it came back online and it understood that it was valued, respected, listened to, and it was an equal partner in the life I was living.
Nasan, did fear dissolve first or did curiosity lead the way?
So I think that first I had to get rid of the fear. So I know when I first got diagnosed, and I won't even say that it started with MS. I think I can actually take a step back and say that when my son passed away, I was still waiting on autopsy reports and coroners and to find out what had gone wrong that led to this outcome. And in the meantime, without knowing and having a firm answer, I decided to jump in and get pregnant again. And I think it's because I really felt like that I didn't want fear to control my life decisions. I wanted to be the one that was creating the reality that I wanted to live in, as opposed to always just having my back against the wall and making the decisions that I had done earlier in my life, which was to make other people happy and to do for everybody else. I was like, but what do I want? And not because I'm scared, but because I'm moving towards a vision of myself that makes me happy. And then when I got pregnant again the second time, that's when I developed MS. And so now I had a complicated pregnancy. I was still high risk. I developed MS. And, it was during the next pregnancy. So I got pregnant again with my daughter because I decided again, I don't want to be in fear. And I have MS now, and I know I have MS. And I'm going to say this to other people that are diagnosed too. At that moment, you really have like three choices for yourself. So you can either say, I'm going to be so scared of what my future holds. So every decision I make that from this point on is going to be based out of fear, which isn't my true self speaking. This is now all the lower vibrations and frequencies. And what happens then is a couple things. Either you get to the end of your life and the disease actually did manifest and it was bad and it didn't heal. And now at this point, you spend every day being so fearful that you never enjoyed any of it anyway, which there's still beauty even when you're sick. Or maybe you were going through all that fear and nothing would have manifested or did manifest, but you stressed yourself out and you wasted all the healthy, good, happy years of your life worrying about an outcome that never came to be. Or you could just decide to just be happy and just be with what is. And, that's really letting go. That's surrendering. That's deciding that uh, regardless of what happens with the ultimate outcome of my body and my life, it's all going to be okay. And and it is okay because sometimes my MS gets worse and sometimes it gets better. But the truth is, once you align with that bigger purpose in your life, you start to realize that you are not your body, you are not your disease. You are this higher self who has value and purpose, even if you're struggling momentarily.
Yes. I think that pivot from fear to curiosity feels like a defining moment in conscious healing. And the five koshas play a central role in your understanding of healing. How did they reframe your relationship with MS?
Yeah, so I think that, I was always a seeker of truth and beauty. So I was always curious, which I think was to my benefit when I got diagnosed with MS, because I definitely knew I wasn't going to stick with the conventional philosophies around MS or the idea that I would poison my body in order to heal it. So I never really wanted to take the medicines. I always knew there was going to be something else and that I was curious enough. I'm going to seek this other thing for myself. But my healing did happen in layers, and I think it does with others. And that sometimes matches the order of the koshas. And sometimes, healing can jump in and out at different parts at different times, layer in different ways. But ultimately, we need all of these layers in order to truly heal. So, just to give the listeners who aren't familiar, the koshas are the five layers of the body as seen by Ayurvedic medicine and yoga. And the five layers are the physical body, the energy body, the mental body, wisdom or intellect body, and the bliss body. And I think that when we look at disease, a lot of us get stuck in the physical body and we think that this is where disease originates and this is where we heal it. And you can do a lot in the physical body because we are a body. We live in a 3D reality. And even though the physical body is very much an illusion because it still is only energy vibrating, it does become to us, at least under the illusion that this is a physical body that needs to be fed. It needs to, have a water. It needs to have oxygen. It needs to have movement. But there's so much more to that. And so once I figured out that I also was an energy body and I started to do practices more like pranamaya, so breath work, meditation, I started finding healing modalities like pulse magnetic field therapy, microcurrents, red light therapy, where I was really starting to bring in outside sources. So I'm looking at ways that I can increase the energy and open up my meridians, my chakras to restore like flow of the energy. But I started to realize that even that reached a certain point that I couldn't get past. And this is when my understanding of the body deepened even more. And I started to see that we originally, because physics comes before the energy and before the biomechanics and chemistry in the body, we need our blueprint to be working correctly. We need the information field to be balanced. And there's quite a few ways that I came about that. One was through hypnotherapy. and going, well, yes, I meditated and I worked on my conscious mind. I worked on my conscious habits. I consciously decided to eat well. I consciously decided to exercise. I consciously decided to practice yoga every morning and to meditate. But what about the underlying things, the subconscious that's more in control than we know it is, that's writing out all the pre-programs we have from early childhood and that it sometimes lie outside of our control and awareness. So once I got into working with the subconscious and through neurolinguistic programming, it unlocked another layer of healing that went much deeper. And then I also started to get into bioresonance and infoceutical products. And this is now where we're looking at how can we create a report or an image, a snapshot, if you will, of what the energy body looks like right now. And then once we know what problems are out of tune, and it could be a stuck emotion, it could be a meridian system isn't flowing or stagnant energy. Like once we acknowledge that, then what are we going to do to correct it? And so now we can use frequency-based tools where I actually put frequency specific to your issue back into the body, or we can use products called infoceuticals, which is like a structured water. So knowing what's wrong and what your body is looking for support in, giving corrective information back in so your body can come back into balance. And not just the way we think of with the medical field where we're trying to get our hormones in balance and our neurotransmitter and our blood work stats. This is really looking at how do we get the information, the blueprint to come back into harmony. And you could do that through sound, through meditation. There's so many tools. Some advanced, right? We have modern technologies now that can do really cool things, but some of them are so simple and they're accessible to everybody. And that really is just to take a breath once in a while, to like remember to just sit with yourself, to put your device down, to not be influenced by the dissonant frequencies of fluorescent lighting and Bluetooth and media and social media scrolling and this social pressure from the outside, and really to look inwards, right? And taking responsibility for what information are you projecting out? Because when you think, your body listens. And your mind thinks in language. It's analytical. It creates categories. It makes judgments and expectations. But your body is all based on vibration, frequency, sensations, emotions, feelings. And that's why we need to get back into our body and really feel it at that level and pay attention to it so that we understand the messages it's sending to us. And, unfortunately, we live in a society now that overvalues the mind. And you see that in all the, mental health issues and anxiety that plague people.
Yes. And also, modern medicine often treats symptoms in isolation. Where do you feel it misses the deeper conversation?
Well, I think that even the idea that they say the mind and the body is, just ridiculous. You can't separate the mind and the body. It all lives within that same energetic field. And the fact that it also separates us as a soul. And I mean, and this is not to say that people are required to believe in religion or to believe in God or a certain set of dogma or ideologies, but this idea that yoga was always trying to get us back towards like yoga being the yoke of the mind and the body. It's the bridge, it's the consciousness that says we are all part of the same field. And even for people that are not religious, we can see that quantum physics is really describing this again, where we see that we're all part of a unified field and that we are entangled and it's non-local, and that things like time and space start to dissolve, and the idea that we even are a physical body. And so when modern medicine starts to treat us as, just one system or one specialist, right? You go to see the neurologist if you have MS, you go to see the cardiologist if you have a heart problem. But who's looking at you and asking the right questions? Being curious, like we were talking about a moment ago, instead of being feared of the diagnosis, being more curious as to like, well, what was the root cause of this? Like, what happened in my energetic blueprint that threw me off of this? And what are the ways that are going to heal it? Because that is not one size fits all, and it's not going to be the same for everybody. And even when I look at my energy reports I do for my clients, it requires a certain amount of intuition on both parts, not just mine as a practitioner. Because when I see something coming up, I won't understand if the thing I'm seeing in your liver could be because you actually have fatty liver, or because you're actually taking a medication that's clogging your liver up, or is it because you have unresolved anger? Then that's associated with the liver. I need the other person on the other end, or myself when I'm doing my own healing, to become really intuitive and to really understand the subtle nature of all of these things and how you can't separate one from the other. They're all linked together in a very meaningful way. And when you start to, just like through the koshas, when you start to layer these all together and understand that true healing only comes when you're in balance and aligned with who you are, and that looks different between me and you because we're not here for the same reason. The same lessons are not meant for both of us. And this is why we don't suppress and we don't push things away. We welcome them, we thank them, we get the message that we need, and a lot of times, even the smallest thing, like just acknowledging your pain, makes it go away. And anyone that practices emotional freedom technique or tapping would know that it can be really powerful just to acknowledge, say, your headache and say, thank you. And then asking it to just that it's okay. We don't need that signal anymore. We've heard you. And then that's how the mind and the body are working together. The mind is communicating back to the body through language. Yes, I've heard you. The body is communicating through the symptoms and the signals, and they both are in this dynamic, constant exchange with each other, and we can't exclude one for the other.
Yes. I think this tension between intervention and intuition is something many listeners quietly navigate. And also for someone living with chronic illness who feels betrayed by their body, what's the first step toward restoring trust?
Well, I think it's really understanding that your body is on your side. Like it's not trying to fail. The body isn't trying to hurt you. The body didn't just give up on you. The body is constantly looking to go back to homeostasis, balance, and health. But it's up to us to support the body to do that. So we can't ask the body, we can't. I'll take myself as an example, and I'm sure other people will resonate with this. I did years of caffeine, nicotine, sugar, drugs, alcohol. I didn't sleep well. I pushed through the pain. I didn't listen. And then my body betrayed me by getting sick. And that's what I feel like. Oh, you betrayed me. How dare you do this to me? You let me down. And now I'm in this antagonistic, angry, resentful relationship with my body. When the truth really is, how did I show up in the past for my body? And if it wasn't good, okay, we don't want more bad emotions. We don't want guilt. We don't want shame because those are not going to be conducive to healing. It's time to just go back and just say, okay, maybe there was things I should have done and I could have done better. And so going forward, my body's asking me to support it and I'm going to take the actions required, which means that you have to then do those things. So if that means like for myself, I had to give up gluten, sugar, seed oils, dairy, alcohol. I gave up smoking. You know, and my biggest treat now in life is Perrier because it's fizzy water, but even that bothers me, so I have 1 a day only, and that's being a partnership with your body. It's respecting that sometimes it needs rest, and sometimes, it gets sick, and sometimes it gets worn down, and that's just a signal that it just needs support, right? And so instead of being something that you need to fight against, be angry at, or overcome, it's just working alongside it, and really knowing that it's doing the very best that it can, and sometimes even when we do all the right things, our healing can be stagnant sometimes still. And then again, I want people to take some of the pressure off because we live in a world now which is much more complicated and difficult for our bodies and our minds than ever before. We have genetically modified food. We have things spraying in the air above us. We have, so much more frequencies in the environment, blue light and toxic um, Wi-Fi and 5Gs around us. Our bodies are being asked to live in ways that it was never designed to, and that in evolution, it hasn't caught up the ability yet. And so when the body sometimes needs extra support now, instead of feeling like the body's letting you down, just really thinking like my poor body is really doing a lot for me and maybe I need to give it extra self-love and self-care, and listen to it and respond because listening isn't even enough. You have to take meaningful action afterward to give it what it's needing.
Thank you so much for this wonderful advice. And thank you for your courage, your honesty, and deep presence today. And I think your story reminds us that the body is not betraying us, it's communicating with profound intelligence. And I'm really grateful for the vulnerability and that, like, the insights you shared, and for inviting us to rethink what healing truly means. And if after this my listeners want to connect with you, then what's the best way?
Yeah, so I have a new book out right now. It's on Amazon called Unlearned Disease, Relearn Well-Being. And it goes through part memoir of my own story, but also very energy-based healings and told through the framework of the Five Koshas. And then you can also reach me on my website, energyovermatter.com. And from there, you can join my free healing circle, which is available to everybody. That way, regardless of where you are in the world, we could still connect and work together. And then I'm on, all the regular socials, and it's under the same handle, Energy Over Matter.
Yes, and I will make sure to attach all these details and links below so that the listeners can find them easily and get in touch with you and to know more from you because you're truly, truly an amazing person. And to all my listeners, the body is not the enemy, it's the storyteller. If this conversation resonated, let it soften you into deeper listening. Healing doesn't begin with fixing, it begins with relationship. Take one moment today to ask your body what it needs and give yourself that permission to hear the answer. And do not forget to hit the follow button, subscribe, and also feel free to share your thoughts because your ears deserve premium content. Thank you.